were created. So these buildings also were overcrowded. They had created internal partitions, and and also technology changed. So cables were seen here and there. So I mean, it was like getting overloaded with changing times. It was like outliving its utility in many ways. So it is high time that modern structure, which are energy efficient, which have got more space, modern look, and this will create the ambience where the staff, officers and staff, they can do in a better mindset. Better environment will give better working condition, and I'm sure it will motivate the state governments and all levels of governments to also think of improvising, creating newer structures for their office complexes also. And lastly, before I would say that it is like this is a mission which has to be driven. This has given a signal that right up to the panchayat level, gram panchayat level, the whole office structure should be modernized in structure, and not only in the processes but structure. So I think it's a wonderful project. Really heralds a new era.
Bhargav, your opening comments on this, and where do we put public? Because any architecture, any city making is also about ideology, culture, philosophy, the dominant themes of time, and people. So where do we put people here in the central vista? Ambika Bhargav, my question is to you. Is my question, are you able to, I think there's a bit of a line problem with Ambika Bhargav. Dr. Rao, can you take this question? Where do we put people?
Yeah, so, hi, this is architect Ambika Bhargav. See, our PM is actually working on 5 E's, which is like ease of performance and effectiveness, eco-friendly building structure. Then we have this empowering people. So the final point, which is like empowering the democracy, this is how he has integrated the whole ministries and departments which were scattered previously, and hence there was maybe some problem with the coordination of different departments working together, and hence this particular project has brought together all these departments. Like, it's about 51 ministries coming together, working under same roof. And so this integration is going to definitely help the democratic procedures and improve the work culture, as well as the coordination between different departments. So this is a very great initiative of our Honorable PM, and it also goes along with his vision of net zero 2070. So this is actually a globally vision which is coming to shape now, and definitely inspiring the other state governments and going up to the rural departments also. So
Dr. Rao, every cityscape, has to be organically part of the people. My question to you is, where do we put people here, sir?
Yeah, of course, people are very much at the center of all these complexes that have been built, because people work here, and people work here for the people at large, for the citizens of the country. So the earlier buildings were built a very long time back, and it was really very difficult for people to, the government employees, to operate in these buildings, because things have changed. So you need to retrofit these old buildings with air conditioning, with Wi-Fi, with various other kinds of storage of files and so on and so forth. It was becoming very, very difficult for people to operate. And that was actually reducing their efficiency and governance at large. So in order to achieve the dream of our Honorable Prime Minister to build a new India and an Atmanirbhar Bharat, it is very important that we have efficient administration, efficient governance, and that is possible only when you have efficient buildings, efficient infrastructure, so that delivery of the official processes becomes very smooth and seamless. For example, if people want to have, let's say, online meetings, everybody doesn't have to come to the ministry. So you need to have the best of technology available there, and quick processes. And also for the people who are working, for them to be motivated, you need a good office built environment, good interiors, so that they get enthused and then they don't feel tired and they put in their best. So I think this whole scheme of things of the 6 or 7 Kartavya Bhavans is, I think, something that was long pending. It was necessary, and finally it has seen the light of the day. In fact, when I was the chairman of the Delhi Urban Art Commission, I had an opportunity to examine all these drawings, and we had given the approvals for these, and we could see that these are state-of-the-art buildings. There is so much amount of parking that's available here. There is an integration of the built environment with the natural environment. A lot of greenery that's put up here, and these buildings are all basically green buildings. You have double glazed windows, you have saving of water and electricity. So there are so many features which are there in probably the corporate sector buildings. So government service should be on par with the best of working environments anywhere in this country. And I think government employees have been feeling this need for a very long time, that look, in the corporate sector you have very good work environments, but in the government we really don't have that. So I think now it's really going to help the citizens of this country, because government employees can better implement the government programs. Government programs are all tailor-made and meant for the citizens of this country. So if you have to implement these, then you need a good working environment, and I think these buildings are providing that. So I think it's an investment that is well worth it, because it's also going to save on a lot of rentals which we have been paying. And then the interdepartmental coordination that we keep talking about, that is perhaps lacking, that will be better possible now, because all these buildings will be at one place. It will be very easy for one to move from one building to the other. So there are multiple advantages, and I think today is a great day and a historic day for all of us.
Doesn't it, Dr. Krishna, end the makeshift approach which was there in Lutyens, Delhi? You know, you have one ministry here and another ministry there, sort of a makeshift approach. And don't you think that this is much in line with what Prime Minister has been doing in past? If you examine as a Chief Minister, entire Sabarmati front, you know, it created a new place where people could come together in Ahmedabad, or the way the renewal of the Ghats of Banaras, it has recreated the economy, or even the Ayodhya, the central vista. It is a new approach, you know. I'm not saying that it's as lazy as the lawns which were there earlier, but then he by redefining the urban landscape, it is also his imprint, the way he conceives of smart architecture, smart cities, modernity, also reflecting in parliament, efficiency, heritage, tradition and modernity all being blended.
Well, I think a little bit of, I agree with most of the, part of the statement what you have said, but I would say that it is not that old was totally to be condemned. It is not so. You see, I have worked in these buildings. Dr. Rao has also been attending various activities, official activities in one or the other building. These buildings are mainly for the Udyog Bhavan, the Shastri Bhavan, and the Nirman Bhavan and Krishi Bhavan. They are not far away from each other, really speaking. So just to be fair to situation, having said that, I had earlier said that these buildings were generally overcrowded because the bureaucracy had expanded, and government programs, as time was passing by, more and more missions programs are coming up. So more staff, both government's own staff and hired staff, consultants and so on, the number is multiplying, and therefore we required more space. And these buildings could not, they were designed in a different framework. So refurbishing the buildings with the modern technology, it was a challenge. And therefore it is worthwhile. It is worthwhile doing that. That is one part. Now you also asked a very important thing, what about the urban landscape in the country as a whole? I would say that, again, I have said that we have to be realistic also. That India is the growth of urbanization is more in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities in terms of percentage growth of population and so on. And therefore, whether the tier 2 and 3 cities are getting attention, that we have to see. And therefore, I would say that, tier 2 and 3 cities also have government offices. the district offices. You go to any sub-registrar's office, RTO office in a Mufassil area, in a tier 2 or 3 city, you find it's a crammed office. There's not enough place for vehicle parking or for people to visitors to come, and so, and many states are doing it. It's not that nothing is happening anywhere. Many states have taken wonderful steps to modernize the public offices. They're not, but as a whole concept for the country as a whole, it is high time that we, and also we restructure the government.
Krishna, I completely agree with you. I started journalism in 1998, and I think that for the first time when I went inside North Block building was in 2001, and I've done corridor thumpings in entire, I think from the President House to the South Block to the North Block, from the wiring to the rooms and the antechambers and the rooms for the PS and the APS. I mean, so it's mind-boggling. I mean, so there is no one can differ from you. But my point was very different. It also goes on to show that, we will have museums as North Block and South Block. Those symbols of the Lutyens' power, they'll be gone. They'll be turned into museums. The landscape will speak a different language. We will have a permanent residence for the Prime Minister, Vice President as a resident. The ad hocism is gone. A Lutyens' bungalow functioning as a VP house, that ad hocism is gone.
Well, I think in a way you are right. It all depends on how we define everything. Simplicity was also appreciated once upon a time. Simple living, high thinking. That is what, when we joined service, we were told that, the ideal of the Mahatma Gandhi's lifestyle and so on and so forth. These were the order of time. Now times are changing. Now the moment people join service, within 2 years they want a very nice car, they want to possess a house, nice house within 5 years of joining service. So like that, the mindset is changing, environment is changing. To that extent, I agree with you. But we should not be totally, I would say that ashamed of our past. And lastly, I would say that it is not to condemn British everything. Their governance framework was not too bad. It is a very well established. We have followed it, and India could remain United India for following many things. Many good, many bad things were also there. Similarly, the buildings they built were, you also accepted buildings were, and Shastri Bhavan and Nirman Bhavan and Udyog Bhavan, they were not built by the British. They were built post-independence in the 50s.
No, I concede the point from an academic point of view. I understand, it's just not black and white. But the fact is, Ambika, when I was covering in UPA1, there was a talk that, we should have a new parliament. And I remember the floor where Mr. Murli Devra was sitting in that house. And I think he was not there that day. It came down. And then there was a pan shop on the 3rd floor. It was closed down, Pakodi shop. On the 2nd floor of the parliament. So, there was no movement, but now we have a parliament. So, when I use the word ad hocism, at least the landscape of the Lutyens has changed for good, at least a part of it, not everything, but a substantive part of it which has to deal with governance, Ambika.
Yeah, definitely. And see, the issue is, previously most of the system was manually working. Now we have switched to automated systems. So that has to be in like we are designing for continuity. We were not designing for a particular era. So going with that, previously we had seen that people were demanding that there is a need to have an integrated building complex where all the departments can function very well. So I think this is a very good initiative, and it should be supported by everyone, keeping aside whatever political and ideological differences are there. So because now it's not just like being an architect, I can say that we are not just shaping the skylines of the building, we are shaping the timelines. So this is going to be remembered for generations to come, what we are offering to the coming generation. So it becomes something like a legacy for the whole country. So it should be appreciated in that ways. And definitely I agree with sir that previously also...
I'm really sorry. We were on a planned program, but there's a bit of a breaking news, so that has come. Donald Trump has imposed additional 25% tax on India. Sorry, I have to cut out of this this programming on the Prime Minister and the Kartavya Bhavan. Trump has announced additional 25% tariff on India. That's a big breaking that is coming in. Trump signs executive order for additional 25% tariff. What does it mean for India? What will happen now? How is India going to respond? This is the big news that is coming in. This is the big news that is coming in, that Trump signs executive order for additional 25% tariff. It's a big news. And I will be joined by my colleague Krishna from the newsroom, and he will be taking us as to what does it mean for us. What does it mean for us when 25% tariff is being 25% tariff has been announced. It's a big deal now. It's a big deal. 25% tariff has been announced. 25% tariff. Trump has announced the relationship will take a new low. Let me straight away go to Krishna, who joined me from the newsroom. Krishna, just break it down for us.
Oh, that's right, Kartikeya. This is quite the shocker that is coming in from US President Donald Trump. Bear in mind, when he said that from the 1st of August, 25% tariffs plus a penalty for importing Russian oil will kick in, he did not mention at that stage what that penalty percentage is likely going to be. But here we are. It looks like a 25% additional penalty, which means the United States of America's tariffs on India is going to be double than what was announced earlier, which is already 25%. So it's now going to be 50% tariff on Indian goods being imported into America. That's what this means, Kartikeya. 25% plus an additional 25%. I don't think many expected that. But the fact of the matter here is that Donald Trump has been raving and ranting and going on a tirade about India buying oil from Russia, and that being a major deal breaker for him, a major irritant for the United States of America. And here too, the executive order that has been signed by Donald Trump mentions the fact that India directly or indirectly imports oil from Russia, which, let's face it, there is no secret about it. And as India has been telling the world, the US in fact encouraged India to start buying oil from Russia since the war began, to stabilize global oil prices. And now suddenly you have Donald Trump going completely against it, over and above everything else, all the other possible issues that stand between a free trade agreement between India and the US, which has not been signed, which is the reason why you're seeing tariff happening. Of the many things that concerning that, one of them seems to be now India's import of Russian oil. That seems to be the point that Donald Trump is harping on, to the level where he's actually doubled the tariffs, Kartikeya. Bear in mind, Krishna, we always knew it is 25% plus, but I don't think anybody expected 25% plus 25%.
Krishna, the issue is, when he says 25% tariff, what is getting affected? Cement is getting affected, steel is getting affected, apparel is getting affected, agricultural product is getting affected. Which are the industries which are getting affected? Because the Prime Minister said that he will ensure that the MSMEs and the small industry is not affected. So can you just take us through what are the sectors that are going to be affected, and how India will show resilience in fighting this, I would say, completely unpredictable aspect of Donald Trump, Krishna?
Right. It's extremely unpredictable. And Kartikeya, right now it looks like a flat 25% plus 25% tariff on all Indian goods. That's what this essentially means. It hasn't given a category. It hasn't given a particular sector.
Are you saying, Krishna, it's 50%? Krishna, are you saying that in some goods the tariff is going to be 50%? Are you saying that?
That is what this looks like, Kartikeya, at this stage. And that's why it's a shocker. It's a massive shocker, because it was meant to be 25% plus a penalty for importing Russian oil. Now that penalty has been quantified as another 25%.
Krishna, you stay with me.
The total tariff is 50%.
Krishna, you stay with me. I'm also joined by Aditya Rajkol. Aditya, is this expected? This 25% tariff plus 25% tariff? Did PMO expect that? Did the government expect that?
Well, that's right. It's a big development coming at this hour. President Donald Trump has announced an additional 25% tariff on India. That means the entire tariff goes up to 50% at this stage. It's certainly a big shocker. India and US have been allies, and, there's a global strategic partnership between India and the United States. And in spite of that, Donald Trump really going that extra way and, in fact, slapping 50% tariff against India. In fact, just about 2 days ago, Donald Trump had announced that he would be actually intensifying substantially the tariffs against India. clearly, all is not well diplomatically between India and the United States. This also comes on a day when it's amply clear that Prime Minister Narendra Modi would be traveling to China for the SCO summit, thereafter to Japan. But how will diplomatically the Ministry of Commerce as well as the Ministry of External Affairs navigate through this challenge? It really needs to be seen, and how India reacts to this kind of a message that comes in. Of course, NSA Ajit Doval is currently in Russia, and there's dialogue expected with Putin. But clearly, not many options at this stage, apart from a backroom diplomacy that can continue between New Delhi and DC. But at this stage, Donald Trump, in a almost a 4 to 5 page long executive order, has announced an additional 25% tariff, taking the entire tariff to 50% at this stage.
Krishna, please take us through the sectors which are going to be affected one by one. How is the apparel sector going to be affected? How is cement going to be affected? And how is MSME going to be affected? Krishna.
All right. As you're rightly pointing out, the sectors that will be affected, let's take this one by one. Textiles, cut and polished diamonds, tires, metals, and auto components. All these sectors will be deeply affected because a lot of sourcing happens from India, because Indian auto components and Indian textiles and cut and polished diamonds come at a good price. But with these tariffs, that competitive advantage gets taken from India, and that's how these sectors get affected. Indian goods become more expensive to be sourced. If anybody wants to source cut and polished diamonds or auto components or textiles, then India as a chosen destination for sourcing them, India loses that advantage because of tariffs, making these products that much more expensive. Let's also then talk about where India's exports, the majority of India's exports to the US come from. Let's look at those sectors. Electronics, gems and jewelry, pharmaceuticals, and nuclear reactor and machinery. These alone account for 49%, nearly half of India's exports to the US. All these sectors will also be affected, Kartikeya. That's what it's looking like, because right now, the only thing that I am waiting for is that Trump has been threatening huge tariffs on pharmaceuticals per se, as a space per se. We don't know if pharmaceuticals as a sector will be taken off separately and levied even more tariffs by Trump. But for now, pharmaceuticals exported from India to the US will face a 50% tariff, and that is just too hefty. Makes Indian goods that much more expensive and that much losing in competitive advantage to all the other competitors, and it will have a major impact on all Indian companies operating in these sectors, be it the major number of exports or also even if they're not major, India has a competitive advantage because of its low cost. So in summary, to put it together, everything from textiles to gems and jewelry to electronics to heavy machinery to nuclear reactor related and auto components as well, all these sectors will be affected majorly because of these 50% tariffs, because 25%, it's very hard to guess what Donald Trump is going to do. But then 25% plus is what we thought. It's not 25% plus, it's 25% multiplied.
Let's
by
just stay
two.
with me. Karthik Malhotra, my colleague, also joins me. Just stay with me. Karthik, thank you so much for joining at such a short notice. What does it mean, Karthik, this 50% tariff? Are we looking at 50% tariff, and how does it affect us in context of our export? What are the margins we are looking at, and how does it impact our overall growth? Karthik.
No, it's definitely bad news, Karthikeya. There's no doubt about that. It's 25% plus 25% that makes it 50%. But there's, on the brighter side, it's not 100%. At one point, Donald Trump was talking about imposing 100% penalty on countries importing Russian oil. It's not 100%. He's also gone on to say that tariffs on Russian oil imports and sanctions on Russian oil imports could run as high as 500%. So honestly, this 25% plus 25%, 50% is a problem, is an issue. But how much of this will actually get implemented? How much of this will get negotiated? Is this going to come into effect on 7th August or not US time? Is there going to be another extension to these tariffs? These are unanswered questions right now. And unfortunately, they continue to be unanswered questions when you're looking at a situation as uncertain, as volatile, as we often see with Donald Trump.
We are in the same boat as Brazil. That's the Bolsonaro tax, 50%. Which is the most vulnerable sector right now, Karthik?
So I think in terms of vulnerability, there are multiple sectors. See, which are the sectors which actually have a dent when it comes to exports to the US. We're definitely talking about the pharmaceutical sector. And this pharmaceutical sector, if I understand correctly, is outside of this ambit of 50% tariff, simply because there is another announcement that came from Donald Trump yesterday that the pharma sector is going to face tariffs successively as high as 250%. Then, of course, there is the copper sector and the aluminium and the steel sector. Now, the copper sector, again, has already been slammed with tariffs of 50%. So, honestly, no change there. Then there is the steel and the aluminium sector, which already have a 25% baseline tariff. So is this 50% going to be applicable on the steel and aluminium sector in addition to what the 25% base tariff is? We don't know, because with Trump, every time there are these little, issues which remain unanswered. Then, of course, you have the diamond sector, you have the auto sector, you have tires, you have textiles. The labor-intensive sectors are the ones that India really wanted to promote with the bilateral trade deal with the US, which now seems even more distant than it has ever seemed in the past, even though we are exactly 19 days away from the US delegation likely to visit India on August 25th. So labor-intensive sectors like leather, like textiles, like some auto components, these are sectors which are likely to now become more uncompetitive when it comes to their exports to the US. But if you keep those sectors aside, because the contribution of those sectors also as a proportion of GDP and India's GDP is not that high. The pharma sector is give or take about $10 billion worth of exports to the US. Now, if you keep that sector aside, all other sectors are pretty much in a much lower territory. So I'm saying the dent, if you were to ask me to make a guesstimate, which is something that I could do at the moment, I believe the impact is unlikely to be more than perhaps give or take about $25 billion on the outside, because India's overall trade with the US is about $130 billion.
Okay,
India
that's the business part, Karthik.
$70 billion.
Karthik, that's the business part. I'm not saying that's a small part, but that's a big part. Krishna, my question to you is on the strategic affairs. We understand that the business part is very, very important. It's about jobs, it's about currency, it's about our financial health. But we have had a strategic relationship with the United States of America. There's a tech relationship with the United States of America. After Narasimha Rao, there was a bipartisan consensus between BJP in Congress to continuously improve relationship with the United States of America. Do you think that India's relationship with the United States of America can become a political football, Krishna?
It has already become, Karthikeya, already. You look at the response that India's Minister of External Affairs has given to these continued tariff threats from Trump. India is putting up a very solid defense and telling the entire world that, it was the US that encouraged India to buy oil from Russia when the war began. So it has already become a matter of political contention. The fear here at this stage is that all the good work that has been done in the recent past to take the India-US relations to the next level. Let's face it, the US is India's biggest trading partner at the end of the day. It is the most important strategic relationship for India, for the welfare of its economy and for India's own heft at the global table. So that relationship, which has gone from strength to strength in the recent past, now faces a major crisis because of something like this, because of this particular tariff issue. I mean, 25%. At that point in time, everybody said India needs to take it on the chin and grin and bear with it until a final trade deal is struck between India and the US. 25% take it on the chin. 50%, where will India take it? I will be really interested to know what will be India's response to this. Indian Minister of External Affairs is yet to come out with a statement, but it will be very important because India, on one hand, cannot afford these tariffs, cannot afford to take it lying down. On the other hand, it also has the responsibility to ensure that all the good work that has been done in terms of Indo-US relations do not get decimated on this one particular issue. In the larger context of things, it might be one issue, but it's a crucial issue considering the way the global economy is and the stakes are so high, both for the US and for India. So economics has now the potential to threaten the quality of politics and diplomacy that's gone on.
Krishna, you stay with me. My colleague Aditya Raj joined me from Israel. Aditya, there's another aspect, where I want you. Prime Minister Modi had invested heavily in Donald Trump. 2019 Motera rally, Prime Minister had ensured that when he came back, he was there in White House. That investment was made. Trump has not respected that. What is going to be our response?
That's right, Karthikeya. We've had, bonhomie between Trump and Modi that has been spoken about in detail. In fact, they've shared stage in India as well as in the United States. Of course, the entire relationship, the bandwidth of the relationship has gone from strength to strength, not just in the areas of economy, trade, but, many of the Indian students studying there. Apart from that, business linkages that we have. So it's a huge challenge for the diplomacy and I would say the economic diplomacy of India and United States at this stage. Trump certainly not looking the other way and in fact slapping 25% additional substantial tariff on India is a massive, massive challenge. Certainly the Ministry of Commerce and the Ministry of External Affairs would be coming out with a statement. They would be studying the implications of this in greater detail. But this is certainly posing a massive challenge and in several sectors all across India, this will have massive, massive implications. So I'm sure that the diplomats in, South Bloc would be studying this in greater detail and come out with a statement later tonight. But as I said, this is something that was unexpected lines with the way things have gone over the last few weeks. But certainly a shocker when we see the entire bandwidth of the relationship between India and the United States. A lot of agreements that have been signed in the last few years. And of course, Modi and Trump had met recently, immediately after Trump actually took over as president for the second time. So, of course, it's a massive challenge, and we'll have to wait and watch how things really unfold. And as I said, from pharmaceutical sectors to agriculture and to the farmers of India, this would have direct implications. India had, in fact, said in the previous statement that our national interest is of vital importance.
Aditya, before I let go of you, I know you're traveling. Before I let go of you, Prime Minister is expected to be in China on the 31st of August. That's an important development that is taking place, and Ajit Doval is in Moscow. How should I read it?
Well, you could see that there could be some dialogue on this aspect as well. There are important visits that are going to take place. Prime Minister Modi visiting China on the 31st at the SCO summit. And of course, Putin and Ajit Doval would be meeting perhaps tomorrow. The big talking point is also that Trump has been attacking India on buying Russian oil. But if you see the statements of the diplomats of the United States over the last few years, they've shown immense understanding. They've shown immense maturity to understand how India has taken this national position. But certainly a complete U-turn taken by Trump is posing a massive challenge for Modi's diplomacy and for the Ministry of External Affairs and particularly Jaishankar and Piyush Goyal. So perhaps a statement likely in the next few hours, but perhaps a bigger challenge lies ahead in the weeks ahead.
And my last question to you, Karthik, before I hand over the baton. I will be handing over the baton to my colleague Kabir. This is a rolling coverage we are doing, This is the rolling coverage we are doing. The baton would be handed live. So my question to you is that there is a tech relationship, there's a business relationship, there's a strategic affair relationship, but there is also business cum security relationship. The West Asia corridor, the Middle East corridor, which is security plus business. There is 2x2 engagement which happens. What is going to happen? This cavalier nature of Donald Trump, doesn't he understand that everything is going to go haywire? The Quad here, the 2x2 there, and the entire idea which Netanyahu was talking about, that Middle East economic corridor?
Right, Karthik, honestly, no simple answers there. These are all valid concerns. And I think, it's important at this point to distinguish between Donald Trump and between the United States of America. Donald Trump perhaps is not at this moment reflecting the overall ideology of the USA. India and USA have a much larger role to play coming from the past, going into the future. I think India-USA relationships have been fairly rock solid. Now, Donald Trump comes in as one element which disturbs this equilibrium which has been enjoyed by India and US over the last many decades. Now, how does this place India? Well, Donald Trump definitely has a problem with the BRICS bloc. So now this Russian oil imports, which becomes a big question mark, is not just a question mark for India. It's also a question mark for China. It's also a question mark for Brazil. So it is playing out right now for, or rather against India and Brazil. It's not yet playing out against China because God knows, Donald Trump perhaps wants to quickly get a deal with China because that seems to be and happens to be the most central nodal point in the entire global supply chain. So Donald Trump is also heading with a degree of caution with its attacks on China. However, with India and Brazil, he's taking a little bigger of a gamble trying to squeeze out a trade deal. Now, valid concerns you raised, there's a Quad versus a BRICS playing out right now. What is India's option if India has to choose one? Can India choose one? Can Donald Trump insist that India chooses Quad or I2U2 over its association with BRICS? And within BRICS, India has its own challenges. India and China sit in the same bloc and are looking at the same policy ecostructure and are looking at pretty much, the same issues, not really being the best of friends, let's put it that way. So there is a Russia angle, there is a China angle, there's a Brazil angle, along with an India angle when it comes to BRICS. But there's this entire I2U2, there is this entire Quad membership in which US is a central partner. So can India strategically, diplomatically choose an either or scenario? I think the simple answer to that is no. We will have to work with the United States, and Donald Trump, to my mind, and he has used this term in the context of India and India's negotiations, I think Donald Trump right now is an irritant for India, and that irritant will have to be dealt with either by using economic muscle or by using diplomacy, and India is flexing its diplomacy fairly well. India hasn't yet arrived perhaps at a stage to flex its economic muscle as much. So there are certain areas like pharmaceuticals where US depends on India. Can India say, sorry, Mr. Donald Trump, we are not going ahead and we are not paying you tariffs on pharma, import from anywhere else you like to? That becomes a cost imperative.
Karthik, very important point. Absolutely. But when we talk about the business relationship, we have to account. Krishna, are you still there with me? Krishna, are you still there?
Yes.
When we talk
Please go
about
ahead.
it's about Donald. There is a deep people-to-people engagement between the United States of America and India. It's not only about Donald Trump. His presidency will end in 3.5 years. People go to educational universities. There is already deep engagement which India enjoys with the people of the United States of America. Do you think that comes into effect? Because ultimately the politicians can come and go. The countries stay, the people and their interests are durable. Krishna.
Absolutely. People-to-people connection is one of the most important connections that India and the US have. Right now, at this stage, purely what is happening here is a matter of trade wars that is playing out, that has the potential to affect the larger strategic relationship between India and the US. As far as people-to-people relationship is concerned, that is another conversation that has been taken up, everything from the visa regime to other issues to Trump's own tirade of asking every single company from the smallest to the biggest, including Apple, to keep hiring Americans and stop hiring Indians even. So there are other issues on the table to be tackled with Mr. Donald Trump, with the United States of America. But before we could get to that looks like tariffs have now become a much bigger, more immediate threat and a crisis that India has to deal with. Karthikeya, from where I sit, that's what I think. Yes, there are other issues to be ironed out, including people-to-people connect, which can be improved dramatically, considering how long Indians have been there in the US and been contributing to the United States of America's politics and economics and society at the same time. So a lot needs to be done, and a lot needs to be done for those still workers from India who go to the US to work for companies. What can be done for them? So enough and more people-to-people connect related issues need to be tackled with. But it looks like, all of that, is being pushed behind by this entire tariff tirade, this tariff threat, cycle that Donald Trump seems to be having with India. First, to start with, we'll need to deal with that. How we are going to deal with that will be the first top priority.
If you ask me, Krishna,
only then we can think about the other issues on the table.
If you ask me, Krishna, this is not about trade. This is neo-imperialism of the United States of America. This is not about trade. This is neo-imperialism. This is not about tariff. This is about punishing countries. This is about punishing countries who want to do better in the world. For example, when they put tariffs and sanctions on Iran, our Chabahar project suffered in 2018. So Gwadar was built, and the Chabahar, which was a $900 million project, was being built by Indians as an alternative to Chinese-built Gwadar. We couldn't take that. So that is the problem. The United States of America has turned into a sanction state. From 1949, they have done 656 unilateral sanctions, hurting most of the countries. And the Trump in his own presidency has taken it even further. Your comments on it, Krishna?
Well, absolutely. Trump has brought back the specter of, America primarily being a sanctions regime. Right now, all that we're talking about the US is what is the level of tariffs that can be levied. And you're talking about, and it's not the first time that the US has done, but no, it has its phases. There was a Ronald Reagan phase in the US, and it looks like, many attributes of that Ronald Reagan phase is back with the Donald Trump phase, albeit split in between by a Biden presidency. So the United States of America right now, led by Donald Trump, is clearly positioning itself as a sanctions regime, as you're rightly calling it, because the sanctions are not limited to India. The sanctions are not limited to any particular region in the world. It's across the board, and that is the reason why many, experts and analysts believe that if India's competitive advantage gets tapered off because of these rising tariffs, it's not just India. Everybody's competitive advantage is being taken away by Donald Trump with the tariff regime, and in that sense, this is a bullying tariff regime. You're literally bullying countries and bullying economies into dragging them into the negotiating table to agree on terms that are suitable to you. And clearly, India is not playing ball. Otherwise, we would have had a free trade agreement by now with the US. We have a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom. But we don't have one with the United States of America because the negotiations have not progressed. The negotiations have been stalled. And probably the only explanation to that is that the US wants everything its own way. And that is the kind of state that uses sanctions, that uses trade, that uses tariffs as a weapon to show might and to show, who calls the shots over here. Clearly, the same thing when Donald Trump tried doing it with China, China would have none of it. You saw those days when both of them went at each other when tariffs, peaked beyond 150% at one stage. That was what was happening, and then eventually things calmed down. The only hope here is that, there is more sanity that is achieved, in terms of this rising tariff wars between India and the US. But to be honest, Kartikeya, even if the US is a sanctions regime, you've seen what China can do to the US. And China had the capability to call America's bluff when Trump was going at it, raising tariffs beyond 100%, and China raised it even before, even more than that as well. The question now is that what can India do? Because Trump most likely will go after a Brazil after this. In fact, he's been talking about how BRICS nations are at fault for wanting to go for de-dollarization, and he's been, raving and ranting about that as well. So after India, it could be Brazil, which could face the wrath of sanctions of Trump. Trump is already asking for, all charges against Jair Bolsonaro, the former president of Brazil, to be dropped. So he is likely to use that as a bargaining chip, use tariffs as a weapon to get his way, to get his will, implemented in Brazil as well, in the relationship with Brazil as well. So clearly, you've seen the US do it with all major global powers. It's even doing that with Russia. You've seen Trump's relationship with Putin go from the best to what it is right now. It's as if, he's actually attacking everybody who's trying to do business with Putin. So in that sense, Trump 2.0 is in fact very different from the first presidency of Donald Trump. This time around, as you rightly said, you began this conversation by clearly this is a sanctions regime, and it will be interesting to see how global powers react, because the last time the US was a sanctions regime in the world, the state of play between global powers is very different than to what it is right now.
Krishna, many thanks. Do stay on with us. Bullying tariffs coming from the United States here. Kartik Malhotra, executive editor, R. Sridharan, editor international and group editor business and economy, also with us on the broadcast. We're getting some political reactions here. Let's listen in to those, and then discussion right on the other side as well.
I don't think that's particularly good news for us, but obviously if that takes our total tariffs to 50%, then that's going to make our goods unaffordable to a lot of people in America. And in particularly when you're looking at these percentages, you have to compare them with the tariffs being levied on some of our competitors. And I'm afraid if you look at people like Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, even Bangladesh and Pakistan have lower tariffs than us, then ultimately people will not be buying goods from us in America if they can buy them cheaper elsewhere. So that's not very good for our exports to America. This means we need to very seriously diversify to other countries and other markets which may be interested in what we have to offer. We now have an FTA with the UK. We are talking to the EU. There are many countries in which hopefully we would be able to, but in the short term it is definitely a blow. I don't think we can sugarcoat it.
All right. Sri, let me come to you next. India's energy needs are non-negotiable. We've made it quite clear time and again. 88% of our oil is imported and Russia offers it at the best rates. And that's not geopolitics, that's survival for us at this point in time. But look at the double standards. If economic independence is strategic to the United States, just like Donald Trump has said in this new executive order, why is it a moral failing when India asserts the same right? We're trying to do the best for our own countrymen. What seems to be the problem here?
Well, Kabir, I think it's fairly simple. President Trump, is going around imposing tariffs based largely on his whim and what he feels like, because he thinks he's in a position to do it. And, we were discussing China earlier. And why has he not been able to ram all these tariffs through to China? Because China is a very large economy and very, very significant for US. If China were to stop supplying a lot of the goods that it does to US today, I think US would be very badly hit. So I think he's taking advantage of the relative strengths and weaknesses of the respective economies. So from our point of view, Kabir, as you said, buying oil from the best possible source to protect our own national interests so that people in this country, the consumers, are protected. They don't have to pay inflated prices for oil. Is going to be a very important issue for the government. But I don't see this now getting solved through trade negotiations because clearly President Trump has escalated. He's up the ante, so to say. And I guess the best hope for countries like India and others who've been impacted by these so-called reciprocal tariffs, which are to many people who are, looking at it very arbitrary. I think the best hope would be that the cases which are there in the U.S. courts, which have challenged the president's power to impose such tariffs, which is done under something called the IEEPA, which is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, that hopefully the courts will, see the point of view and say that this is not a national emergency that the US is facing right now. And President Trump has possibly acted beyond his powers than what the Constitution vests in his office. So if the Supreme Court knocks it down, then I think the other route which is available to President Trump would be to go to the Congress to push through a higher tariff. And that would be the right platform because the Congress has the ultimate power to decide on trade policies. It's not so much with the president per se. So if the Congress in its collective wisdom, which includes Democrats and Republicans, decide that these are indeed tariffs that the US should have, then I think the world will reset in a very big fashion. I think Mr. Tharoor was mentioning that India will need to look at other sources to develop as markets. I think that will be expedited. And I think, but it's not going to be just India that hurts very clearly. When you take away a certain supplier from the marketplace, the others then feel that much more comfortable to keep their prices up. So you're reducing competition for the American consumer. You're increasing costs and you're also reducing competition for American consumer. It doesn't matter that, India has gone out of the market today from America, theoretically speaking. But the bigger issue would be the American consumer now doesn't have the choice. He doesn't have competition. So a supplier, let's say from Bangladesh or Vietnam, can demand a relatively higher price than what they would have. So what President Trump is also denying the American consumer is the benefit of global competition. The competition to supply to American consumers at the best possible price. So that is something which will eventually sink in. I think we are already beginning to see that inflation is going up, jobless numbers are going up. So this transmission, which was on hold because the tariffs themselves are on hold, but once these rates are implemented, we will see a quick rise in consumer prices in America. And that's when it becomes a real political issue for President Trump. That's when the pressures on the courts will also mount. Congress will then take a greater cognizance of it. And that's when I think some sort of resolution of this whole issue will happen, Kapil.
All right, we'll have to wait and find out whether that really happens, Sri. But an interesting, important point that you've raised over there. Let me just quickly introduce our additions as well here. I can see Ambassador Suresh Goyal with us on the broadcast. Very warm welcome to you, Ambassador. Krishna Kumar and my colleague Karthik continue to be with us. Aditya Rajkal also with us on the broadcast. Karthik, we were earlier talking about China being key to that particular puzzle. We do need to talk about that as well. What are these other markets that Tharoor is talking about that we need to diversify? What could be some potential options? Maybe Ambassador can come on that as well. But Aditya, let me come to you quickly. Average US tariffs on EU goods 1.47%. Average EU tariffs on US goods 1.35%. The highest tariff since 1935, 50% tariffs. How seismic a shift does that now mean on the global stage?
Well, Kabir, we are looking at a shocker of executive order that has come in from Donald Trump. If we go through the events that have taken place over the last few weeks, this was quite expected. But if we see the bandwidth of the relations between India and United States, between New Delhi and Washington, D.C. over the last many, many years, the global strategic partnership, apart from that, the 2+2 dialogue, and several other dialogues and collaborations between the two countries, this is certainly unfortunate. You would remember that India, in its last statement, had highlighted how this was unjustified and unreasonable in every way. India was only, getting the Russian oil because it was in national interest of India. Just like United States has taken its own national interest in doing trade with Russia when it comes to different sectors, just like the European Union as well. Now look at the statistics. 50% of the LNG that's coming in, or the piped gas that is coming in from Russia, is for the European Union. And there is no statement whatsoever, no justification whatsoever that has come in from the European Union. And that's what Dr. S. Jaishankar, India's External Affairs Minister, had been exposing over the last 3 years, ever since the war really began, that we condemn aggression, certainly. We are there for dialogue and diplomacy. But don't expect us to join one axis against the other, because we want to remain neutral in such a way where our own priority is our own national interest. Now, what I have been told is that Indian government, both the Ministry of External Affairs and the Ministry of Commerce, are studying the implications of this new executive order that's coming in. Of course, this was quite expected, as I said. They knew that Trump had made it amply clear that substantially he would be raising these tariffs. But what is the way forward? Just like Sridharan mentioned, it's unlikely that the trade dialogue that's happening between India and US is going to resolve this. So will this be taken to the highest level of the political leadership between India and US? Let's also remember that Prime Minister Modi later this month will be visiting China for the SCO summit. And apart from that, there will be a visit to Japan. And currently, NSA, India's NSA, Ajit Doval, is in Russia. He is expected to meet Putin in the next few hours. So hectic diplomacy at play when it comes to New Delhi. But when it comes to the tariffs, really, what is the way forward? Not much, I would say, but a backroom dialogue at the highest level is something that could resolve this. It does seem that Trump has made up its mind. He is certainly go and walk that path when it comes to India. This reminds me of the bonhomie between Modi and Trump also, that has been a point of discussion all these years through the first term of Trump to the second term. And this time, unfortunately, we are witnessing yet again a very hard diplomacy at play from Donald Trump, and very unlikely that this will be resolved very soon.
The greatest deal maker, at least that's what the pamphlet and the poster read on Truth Social. He tries to put out those posters himself before making these announcements. Ambassador Goel with us also on the broadcast. Ambassador, what do you make of this latest executive order? How aggressive do you think this really is? And this new, parlays that are taking place when you look at the BRICS nations, just like Aditya pointed out, Ajit Doval in Russia, Prime Minister going to be visiting China. Lula da Silva has called out Donald Trump's hypocrisy as well. So the BRICS nations also coming into a huddle. What's really happening? And how do you see this is going to play out?
It's a bit complex, really, as I can make it out. And frankly speaking, even though we had not expected the whole tariff ban to go to this extent, but there was always a risk that President Trump would do that, because I don't see that it's really about trade and tariff anymore, really. Tariff has become an instrument for geopolitical gains, and Trump has been using it now really as far as India is concerned. But I think it's just a hunch and my instinct from what I see happening here, it cannot simply be trade. If it was simply trade, 25% was already hurting India. it would have been enough, and Trump had already announced it. But when he goes up to 50% on the excuse of Russian oil, even earlier the Russian oil was there. It was not. There has been no change. So my expectation now really is that Trump is not going to relent on the 50%, number one. Number two, it is not economics anymore, it is not trade, it is more geopolitical. I also noticed that during the Operation Sindoor time, the bonhomie between USA and Pakistan had begun to grow rapidly. And today, in fact, the relationship between US and Pakistan is growing in a manner that we are totally unexpected, really. And it has become, again, basically, as far as the US is concerned, who do you like as a partner, Pakistan or India? And what we see happening is quite clear. Whatever the reasons are, I'm not going to speculate, but that is what I see happening here. Now, given the geopolitics of the situation, I think we need to look at our options. Now, I do remember that India has been through sanctions in the past on several occasions. India didn't cow down. India weathered the sanctions and eventually came out of it. And I'm sure that even now, India will come out of it because the economics, the direction of economics, the compulsions of economics and trade will dictate to the USA that they will have to partner with India. Whether they will do it now, after a few months, after a year, whenever, but ultimately they will have to because the costs do matter. As far as the markets are concerned, I think we can find the markets. It's not a problem. We have a good team. All I would like to say really here is that from our side, we need to reduce the level of noise. You see, all said and done, USA is an important market. And whether it is Trump or whoever it is, we need to keep the future in mind. And we need to keep our goals in mind. Reduce the noise, look at the options, work for the options, and basically make sure that we do not yield to these kind of tactics from Trump when he thinks that geopolitics can dictate to us as to what he wants. And we are not going to go, we are not going to give in. That is very clear. But we don't have to say it. We don't have to be loud about it. I think everybody will know when they know that we are determined. And the minister is determined. So let us leave it there.
That could be a strategic move that India could pull, because we've already shown that mirror to the United States is double standards, but maybe not raising the right kind of noise. Karthik, come in here. Executive order or executive overreach? I mean, is this the great American dream, punishing Indian consumers to promote American values? When Shashi Tharoor was talking about diversifying our market options, what are some possible options that India can now look at? The Philippines president was in India just yesterday. Prime Minister Modi, the Maldives reset has taken place, have a growing heft in West Asia. Could these be probable markets as well? And the ambassador also says that we will be able to ride through this tariff trouble. What do you have to say on that front?
Right, Kabir, honestly, no easy answers. Even if you look at the India-UK FTA, it's going to take a decade until every little clause and every little FTA benefit accrues to either side. So there are no easy answers to that. See, India is already talking to EU. We are hoping that by end of this year, we will have an India-EU FTA going. We already have a deal with Switzerland and that entire region of 4 countries, the EFTA. But again, it's a 15-year deal by when investments will start coming in and markets become completely open. So honestly, there's no overnight solution to finding new markets. It's not that you have folks who are carrying goods in their hands and going and trading, with the next available customer. That's not really the case here. So any strategy that India wants to take on expanding its user base or customer base when it comes to the products that India exports, it's going to be a long haul. It's not going to be an easy answer or an easy win for India because, let's face it, you also have China in the equation, you have Vietnam in the equation, you have Philippines in the equation. These are all countries which are manufacturing in great numbers. India, of course, has certain specializations which those countries don't. We have our own distinct competitive advantages which we can exploit. But I think let's take a few steps back and really try and analyze what has Donald Trump really been up to. If you remember back around February, March, when the word tariff sort of, became a more regularly used term and a more regularly used word in our vocabulary, the fight really seemed to be between United States and Canada on one side and Mexico on one side. And everybody thought the issue is around fentanyl and the issue is around illegal immigration. And Trump went all guns blazing on these two neighbors, both Mexico as well as Canada. And then the first tariff rates come and hit Canada, hit Mexico 25%. These are big numbers. Everybody is talking about them. They're making headlines. Cut to what happens subsequently. China becomes enemy number one. Donald Trump wants to go after China. Donald Trump wants to create a lot of noise, wants to raise tariffs, and then that reciprocal tariff, retaliatory tariff, double retaliatory, triple retaliatory, that went on to a point that tariffs at one point were looking at some 300%, obnoxious numbers. Did they ever get implemented? No, they did not. And then, there was Japan and there was South Korea in between. Strong language used by Donald Trump. They're bad trading partners. They don't want to come to the table. We buy so much from them. They don't buy anything from us. What happened eventually? The rate came down from whatever it was, 25% or something. They quickly stitched up a deal. It came down to 15%. So I don't think right now we need to read too much into what Donald Trump is trying to do. Donald Trump wants to penalize India. That is one school of thought. Donald Trump wants to penalize Russia. That's another school of thought. Donald Trump wants Russian economy to be under pressure so that Russia bows down to Washington's pressure and says that, yeah, okay, maybe we will throttle back on our war on Ukraine. So putting sanctions or putting tariffs on India because India imports Russian oil, the end goal is that US wants, and Donald Trump particularly wants, Russia to be kept out of the equation when it comes to it receiving money. So, it's really not an easy solution. I think India has been maintaining a fairly decent diplomatic stand. It has put a little bit of pressure back on the US. It has said that we are going to protect our own national interest, our own economic interest, and that is something that Ambassador was also just talking about. Is something that we should continue exhibiting. We need not be very vocal about it. Now, coming particularly to sectors which are high value exports to the US, honestly, a lot of those sectors have their own standalone tariffs. Copper, for example, has a 50% tariff. Steel and aluminium have a 25% tariff. Pharmaceuticals will be slapped with tariffs sequentially going as high as potentially 250%. And that number also emerging out of thin air. So right now, if you just look at perhaps barring diamonds, which is one high value export to the US, what is India really talking about? We're talking about textiles, we're talking about leather, we're talking about artifacts. Honestly, not big contributors to India's own economy. Just look at the numbers. India's total trade with the United States is give or take about $130 billion. How much does India export? India exports about $70 billion. $70 billion as a percentage of a $4 trillion economy, which is India, is actually what? It's 1 by 125 or something. It's a small number. You're talking about maybe a 0.5, 0.6% of the overall GDP of India. I'm saying with this 50% tariff, even if that entire trade comes to a grinding halt, what does India have to lose? India will lose possibly 0.4, 0.5%, 0.6% of its GDP. I think that's a gamble India should be willing to take because at the end of the day, US wants India as much as India wants the US market. And Donald Trump should get that message loud and clear, perhaps not by using strict language and really putting up a very tough stance publicly, but by privately saying, okay, you want to slap us with 50% tariffs, we'll take our time, we'll build our market, we will send our products elsewhere. But when inflation hits the United States, which it will sooner or later, I think Trump will realize that maybe this entire tariff nonsense is not going anywhere.
That's again another interesting point that you've raised. R. Sridharan, let me come to you. Do you think we have the wherewithal to ride this through, just like Karthik was telling us? That's a gamble that we should take. Now, of course, we can answer back with facts, just like we did last week as well, or not make that voice that Ambassador is talking about, not to be that vocal, to show ourselves as that damsel in distress on the global stage. But will that account for India coming across as a fearful nation? I mean, that's a little, like a sticky wicket that we're going to be on at that point in time. How do you think now India should be posturing itself on the global stage? Because tomorrow morning, headlines are going to be Prime Minister Modi in the center, flanked by Xi Jinping and Putin on either side, with how the discussions are going on this evening.
So, Kabir, you packed a lot into the